All right, so you're here with us today, and that tells me something.
It does.
Yeah, it tells me you're not just content with like the surface level.
Right.
You want to get to the heart of things
America.
and you want to do it efficiently, you know? We're all busy, right? We're in the digital age and you want knowledge quickly and you want it thoroughly, and that's exactly what we're going to do today.
Love that.
We're diving deep into Bitcoin.
Okay.
And Bitcoin, it's more than just a buzzword, more than just a trending topic.
Yeah, really is.
This is a fundamental shift in how we think about finance, could be a real key to empowerment.
I like how you put it's not just about following the hype.
Right.
Bitcoin's the OG crypto,
Yeah.
right? The original. And in a way, it's the foundation for everything that's come after, a whole new way of looking at money and value.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're going to get to the core of it all using this source. Bitcoin Unveiled, the digital gold rush you can't ignore. We're going to get you understanding how it works, its history, the big picture stuff, without getting bogged down in the techie jargon.
That sounds fantastic. So to sum it up,
Yeah,
our mission is to arm you with a solid understanding of Bitcoin,
that's it.
where it came from, the nuts and bolts of how it works, and why it matters to you as you navigate the modern world of finance.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's jump right in.
Jump in.
The genesis of Bitcoin. Where did this all begin?
Well, it starts with a mystery, really.
Ooh, I love a good mystery.
Satoshi Nakamoto, that's the name we have, but it's a pseudonym. The real person or people behind Bitcoin, we don't know who they are.
Wow, it's like a financial superhero origin story.
Right.
Shrouded in secrecy.
Exactly. And so in 2008, this mysterious Satoshi drops a white paper, a document called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
Okay, so this is like the foundational document.
Exactly.
What's the big idea here?
Okay, so think of it as a blueprint, a vision for digital cash that could operate completely outside the traditional financial system.
Outside of banks, governments, that kind of thing.
You got no banks, no intermediaries, just people transacting directly with each other.
Interesting. And all this is coming out in 2008, right in the middle of the financial crisis.
Exactly. The timing is pretty significant, don't you think?
Yeah.
It suggests this desire for an alternative to the way things were being done.
Yeah, absolutely. Then in January of 2009, theory becomes reality. The Bitcoin network launches the first block, is mined the Genesis block.
Right.
We've got the anonymous creator, the manifesto, and now the actual system.
It all starts coming together.
Okay, but what's the real game changer here? What makes Bitcoin fundamentally different from traditional money?
Two words: decentralization and blockchain.
Okay, I've heard these terms thrown around a lot.
Yeah, they're key.
But can you break it down for us?
Sure, unlike, say, the US dollar, which is controlled by the Federal Reserve, Bitcoin isn't controlled by any single entity.
Interesting.
It's spread out across a network of thousands of computers all over the world.
Okay, so instead of one central authority, you've got this distributed network.
Exactly. And the tech behind it, that's the blockchain. A public transparent ledger, a record of every single Bitcoin transaction.
So everyone has access to this record.
Exactly. It's all out in the open.
But how does that make it secure? How can we trust a system where everyone can see everything?
Because the entire transaction history is copied across so many computers, it's practically impossible to tamper with.
Okay.
Every new transaction gets bundled into a block, and that block is cryptographically linked to the one before it, forming a chain, the blockchain.
I see.
These links, they're secured with super complex math that's incredibly hard to break.
So you're saying to alter anything, someone would have to hack into thousands of computers simultaneously.
Basically, yeah. It's a massive network effort.
And that's pretty much impossible.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so no single point of failure. The records are transparent and tamper-proof.
Exactly.
I can see the appeal of that, especially for folks who are looking for more control over their finances.
Right, it shifts. The power dynamic trust isn't placed in an institution. It's enforced mathematically by the technology itself.
Really interesting. Okay, we've got the basics of decentralization and blockchain. Now let's dig into some key concepts that are specific to Bitcoin. Let's start with this idea of a finite supply.
All right, so unlike traditional currencies where a central bank can just print more money, Bitcoin has a hard limit.
A hard limit.
Built into the code, only 21 million Bitcoins will ever exist.
Wow, so it's like digital scarcity.
Exactly, and that's why people compare it to gold. They call it digital gold.
Oh, I see. So why is this limited supply so important to Bitcoin's value?
Supply and demand, the basics of economics.
I think I remember that from high school.
Right, so
Yeah.
if something is scarce, and the demand for it goes up, the price is going to go up.
Makes sense.
This is a core difference between Bitcoin and traditional currencies with Bitcoin.
Hmm.
There's this built-in scarcity, which could potentially protect it from inflation or currency manipulation.
Hmm. That's fascinating. Okay, so we know there's a limited supply, but how do new Bitcoins actually get created? And how does the network stay secure? That's where mining comes in, right?
Mining's all about validating transactions and adding them to the blockchain.
Validating meaning making sure they're legitimate.
Exactly. And this is done by powerful computers running specialized software. They're solving complex math problems, essentially.
Sounds pretty intense.
It's like a global competition, a race to solve these puzzles first.
And why would anyone want to do that? What's the incentive for miners to dedicate all this computing power?
The miner who solves the puzzle first, they get to add the next block of transactions to the blockchain.
Oh, okay.
And for their work, they get a reward, newly minted Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and any transaction fees that were included in that block.
Ah, so it's a reward system that keeps people incentivized to participate and keep the network secure.
Exactly. Miners are creating new Bitcoin and acting as gatekeepers, ensuring the integrity of the system.
Wow, that's pretty ingenious. Okay, so we've got the limited supply, we've got mining, and then you mentioned something called halving earlier. How does that fit into the picture?
So halving is a pre-programmed event that happens about every 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. And when it happens, the reward for mining a block gets cut in half.
Cut in half.
Yeah, it's a way to control the rate at which new Bitcoins are created.
So it's like slowing down the money printer.
You could say that.
And I've heard that these halving events often lead to big price movements. Why is that?
Again, it comes back to supply and demand.
Okay.
When the reward is halved, fewer new Bitcoins are entering the market. But if demand stays the same or goes up, well,
Prices go up.
exactly.
Fascinating stuff. All right. So we've got the finite supply, mining, halving. These are all crucial parts of Bitcoin's DNA. Now, our source mentions some key figures in Bitcoin's history beyond the mysterious Satoshi, who are some of the people who've played a significant role in its development and adoption.
Well, one name that comes to mind is Andreas Antonopoulos.
Okay, I've heard that name.
He's a real educator, a Bitcoin and blockchain advocate. Through his books, his talks, his online content, he's done a lot to explain these complex topics to a wider audience.
So he's making Bitcoin accessible to everyday people.
Exactly. He's helping people understand not just the tech, but the philosophy behind it.
That's important. And then there are the Winklevoss twins.
Right. Cameron and Tyler, they first gained notoriety for their involvement with Facebook, but they became early investors in Bitcoin.
Big investors, right?
Yeah, and they founded their own cryptocurrency exchange, Gemini.
Okay.
They've been vocal advocates for Bitcoin, and their involvement has brought a certain level of legitimacy to the space.
Right. When you have influential figures from the tech and finance worlds embracing Bitcoin, it helps change the perception.
Definitely. Now, it's important to remember that Bitcoin's journey hasn't always been smooth sailing. It's had its ups and downs, its controversies.
Right. It wasn't an overnight success.
In the early days, it got associated with illicit activities on the dark web.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
And while that was a small part of the overall picture, it did create a negative image that Bitcoin has had to work to overcome.
Right. Even though the vast majority of Bitcoin use is perfectly legitimate, that early perception lingered for a while.
Yeah, and then there was that huge price surge in 2017.
Oh, yeah, that's when Bitcoin really hit the mainstream news.
Right, the price went up to almost $20,000.
20,000.
Yeah, it was a crazy time, brought a lot of new people into the market, and of course there was a correction after that, a big drop in price.
So like a roller coaster ride?
Exactly. But each of these cycles, the ups and the downs, they've actually been important for Bitcoin's development.
In what way?
They've driven adoption, led to more regulation in some places, and spurred the development of important infrastructure like exchanges and ways to securely store Bitcoin.
So even the volatility has played a role in Bitcoin's evolution. It's been tested and it's come out stronger.
You could say that. And speaking of the early days and maybe how people didn't quite grasp Bitcoin's potential back then, there's this famous story about two pizzas.
2 pizzas, tell me more.
Back in 2010, a guy named Laszlo Hanyecz posted on a Bitcoin forum offering 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas.
10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas.
And someone took him up on it. It's considered the first real-world transaction using Bitcoin.
Wow. So 10,000 Bitcoins back then bought you 2 pizzas, and today?
Today, those 10,000 Bitcoins would be worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
No way.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. It really shows you how much Bitcoin has appreciated in value and how little people understood its potential at the time.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around. Imagine spending what's now a fortune on something as ordinary as 2 pizzas.
It's a story that really puts things in perspective.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, especially those who are in that young women aged 20 to 30 demographic that our source mentions,
Yeah.
what's the key takeaway here as you're navigating this new and ever-changing financial landscape?
The source is very clear about this education is key knowledge is power.
Yes, 100%.
Bitcoin and crypto in general can seem intimidating.
Oh yeah, all the technical terms.
Right. But don't let that scare you off. Take the time to learn the fundamentals. And there are so many resources available now.
There are,
Online courses, podcasts like this one, hopefully,
of course,
supportive online communities where you can ask questions and learn from others.
great advice. And if you're thinking about actually getting started with Bitcoin, what are some good places to start?
Platforms like Coinbase or Binance are often recommended for beginners.
They're pretty user-friendly, right?
Yeah, they make it relatively easy to buy, sell, and manage your Bitcoin. But I can't emphasize this enough. You have to understand the risks before you invest any money.
This is not financial advice.
Absolutely not.
But it's a volatile asset. The price can go up and down very quickly. So never invest more than you can afford to lose.
Right. Be smart about it. Protect yourself.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it's important to remember that Bitcoin, while groundbreaking in itself, is also part of a much bigger story.
It is. It's the first chapter, but not the last.
Yeah. So Bitcoin introduced this idea of decentralized digital currency, but it's also paved the way for a whole ecosystem of other cryptocurrencies and what's known as decentralized finance, or DeFi.
Exactly. And understanding Bitcoin gives you a foundation for understanding all of that.
So it's like a gateway. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
Right. And the key is to stay curious, to keep learning, because this is a space that's constantly evolving.
Always changing, always something new to learn.
So I guess the question for you, the listener, is what role do you see digital finance playing in your future? Is Bitcoin just the beginning of a much bigger shift in how we interact with money in the digital age?
Yeah, that's a question worth pondering.
It is.
Lots to think about, lots to explore.
Absolutely.
And we hope this deep dive has given you a solid foundation to start building on.
That's what we're here for.
All right, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
And until next time, keep exploring.
Keep learning.
Keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the world of finance.
It's an exciting time to be a part of it all.
It is.